Imagine being deep inside a steel battleship, engines roaring, waves pounding against the hull, when suddenly a thunderous blast rips through the sea. A single shell, nearly as tall as a man, tears through armor as if it were paper, leaving nothing but fire, twisted metal, and silence. This was the power of the Mark 8 Super Heavy shell, the American naval weapon so devastating, Japanese soldiers didn't stand a chance when it struck. Before we dive deep into the shocking story of this unstoppable round, subscribe to History's No Escape, where we uncover the hidden battles, forgotten weapons, and moments that changed the world forever. It was 1944, and the Pacific Ocean had become a graveyard of steel. The Japanese Imperial Navy was losing control of the seas, but they still had one thing the Americans respected: fearless soldiers and heavily armored battleships. Among them stood Japan's pride, the Yamato-class battleships, monstrous vessels built to dominate the Pacific. Each carried massive 18-inch guns capable of hurling shells weighing more than 3,000 pounds. The Japanese believed no American weapon could match their floating fortresses. But across the ocean, inside secret American naval foundries, something terrifying was being designed. A weapon that could not only penetrate those mighty steel hulls, but obliterate them from within. That weapon was the Mark 8 armor-piercing shell. The U.S. Navy engineers had learned a hard lesson early in the war. Japanese battleships were built like floating fortresses. Their heavy armor could shrug off most shells, and their layered compartments made them nearly unsinkable. So the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance decided, if we can't go around their armor, we'll go through it. The result was a masterpiece of engineering and brutality. A 2,700-pound super-heavy projectile, designed specifically for the 16-inch guns mounted on America's newest and most powerful battleships, like the USS Iowa and USS Missouri. Unlike ordinary shells, the Mark 8 had a hardened steel cap, a delayed fuse, and superior aerodynamics. When fired, it could reach speeds of nearly 2,900 feet per second, fast enough to pierce over 20 inches of hardened armor steel. But the real horror lay in what happened after impact. Once the shell penetrated a ship's hull, it didn't explode immediately. It waited fractions of a second, just long enough to reach the ship's inner decks, ammunition rooms, or engine compartments. Then it detonated, turning thousands of pounds of high explosive into a fiery inferno. For anyone inside, Japanese sailor or officer, there was no escape. On October 25, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Mark 8 shell would prove its terrifying worth. In the narrow waters of Surigao Strait, the Japanese Navy sent a desperate force of battleships and cruisers to break through the American blockade. But waiting for them were the USS Mississippi, USS Maryland, and USS West Virginia. Their 16-inch guns loaded with Mark 8 shells, ready to unleash destruction. As the first Japanese battleship appeared on radar, Admiral Jesse Oldendorf gave the fateful order: "Open fire." What followed was a display of power the world had never seen before. The USS West Virginia fired 6 salvos in rapid succession, each shell glowing red-hot as it roared through the night sky. Within minutes, the Japanese flagship Yamashiro was torn apart. The Mark 8 shells punched straight through her armor belt, penetrated deep into her ammunition storage, and detonated with such force that the entire ship lifted out of the water before breaking apart. The blast was so powerful that U.S. sailors miles away could feel the shock wave in their boots. Of the 400 men aboard Yamashiro, only 10 survived. The Mark 8 wasn't just a weapon, it was a message. Every time it fired, it rewrote the laws of naval warfare. But how did this monstrous shell become so deadly accurate? And what happened when it faced Japan's final superweapon? The legendary Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. After the brutal night at Surigao Strait, The Pacific Ocean fell eerily silent. But beneath that silence, Japan's pride still floated, a shadow of unstoppable power. The battleship Yamato, the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. It was April 1945, and the Empire of Japan was on the edge of collapse. Cities were burning under American bombers. Fuel reserves had vanished. And yet, one final desperate plan emerged from Tokyo's war cabinet, a plan known as Operation Tengo. The mission was suicide. Yamato, along with a small escort of destroyers, would charge toward Okinawa, beach herself on the shore, and fight to the death as a giant coastal gun. It was an act of pure desperation and pure honor. On April 6th, Yamato left Tokoyama port. Her engines thundered across the sea, a sound that once made the Pacific tremble. On board were over 300 men, many barely out of their teens. They knew they weren't coming back. One sailor reportedly whispered, "If we must die, then let us die striking back." But the Americans had been listening. Through radio intercepts, they knew everything: Yamato's route, her speed, her intent. And waiting for her were hundreds of aircraft, B-24 bombers, torpedo planes, and naval strike squadrons, armed not just with bombs and torpedoes, but with something new, something terrifying. The Mark 8 armor-piercing shell had been adapted for naval bombardment and aerial ordnance testing, designed to slice through heavy armor even from the sky. And though the Yamato's fate was sealed by aircraft, it was the Mark 8's terrifying legacy, its penetrating design and delayed detonation, that inspired the weapons used to finish her. As the morning sun broke over the East China Sea, the calm blue water erupted into chaos. More than 400 American planes descended on Yamato's formation like a swarm of hawks. Torpedoes struck her sides and bombs rained down like fiery meteors. The Yamato's anti-aircraft guns roared defiantly, filling the air with black clouds of smoke. But there were too many. Within minutes, her decks were engulfed in flame. Then came the hit that sealed her fate. A modified 1,600-pound armor-piercing bomb, derived from the Mark 8 design, smashed through Yamato's deck armor, slicing deep into her forward magazine. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a blinding flash. The explosion ripped through the ship, lifting the 72,000-ton behemoth completely out of the water. Witnesses described it as a mountain of flame. The mushroom cloud rose over 20,000 feet into the sky, visible from over 100 miles away. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but burning oil and twisted debris. Over 3,000 Japanese sailors went down with her. Only 276 survived. The Yamato's destruction marked the end of the battleship era, and the final proof that the Mark 8's brutal logic had changed warfare forever. You see, the shell's philosophy was simple: precision through power. Its design inspired not just naval artillery, but future generations of kinetic weapons, from bunker-busting bombs to armor-penetrating missiles. The Americans had created something so devastating that even Japan's greatest engineering masterpiece couldn't survive it. After the war, surviving Japanese officers would recall the shock they felt when they first examined fragments of the Mark 8 shell. One wrote in his diary, "It was not a shell. It was judgment from the heavens." By the time Yamato sank beneath the waves, Japan's naval dream was over. The mighty fleets that once ruled the Pacific were now rusting at the bottom of the sea, victims of superior firepower, intelligence, and relentless American innovation. The Mark 8 wasn't just a piece of steel. It was a message from a new age of war. It proved that no amount of armor could withstand technology driven by precision and science. When the guns finally fell silent in August 1945, the Mark 8's thunder faded too. But its echo lived on, in every future weapon that followed, and in every lesson written in blood across the Pacific. When the thunder of Yamato's death rolled across the Pacific, the world had witnessed more than the fall of a battleship. It had seen the birth of a new kind of war. The Mark 8 shell wasn't just another piece of ordnance. It was a symbol of an era where physics, precision, and sheer destructive science began to outmatch brute strength. And after 1945, that philosophy spread across the world like wildfire. The war was ending, but the weapons race had just begun. In the closing months of World War II, as American scientists studied the wreckage of destroyed Japanese ships, one thing became clear: armor could no longer save anyone. The Mark 8 shell, originally fired from 16-inch naval guns, had proved that carefully engineered penetration could defeat even the thickest steel plating. Its secret lay not in raw explosive power, but in mathematical design. A hardened steel tip that stayed intact long enough to pierce armor before detonation. This idea fascinated post-war engineers. What if the same principle could be applied to smaller weapons, to bombs, rockets, and even missiles? By 1947, research began at U.S. naval laboratories to redesign the Mark 8's armor-piercing core into aerial munitions. The result was the AN-MK-1 and MK-33 bomb series, streamlined, reinforced, and optimized for high-speed aircraft. These weren't just weapons. They were the evolution of the Mark 8's DNA, adapted for the skies. The arrival of the jet engine changed everything. Planes could now fly faster, higher, and carry heavier payloads than ever before. But at those speeds, traditional bombs shattered on impact. So American engineers turned again to the lessons of the Mark 8. They reinforced bomb casings with nickel-chromium alloys, using the same delayed fuse technology that made the Mark 8 deadly against battleships. The result was devastating. During the Korean War, American F-84 and B-29 aircraft dropped armor-piercing bombs that sliced through North Korean fortifications, even underground command centers. Every strike echoed the same brutal principle that sank Yamato: hit hard, penetrate deep, and explode only when inside the target. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, their scientists were doing the same. The BR-471B and FAB-5000 bombs bore eerie similarities to American Mark designs. The arms race was no longer about ships. It was about who could deliver destruction with more precision and speed. By the late 1950s, the Mark 8's descendants were no longer falling from bomb bays. They were being guided by radar and jet engines. Enter the Bullpup missile, the first guided air-to-surface weapon in U.S. history. Its warhead, a direct descendant of the Mark 8's penetrative design. A hardened core engineered to break through concrete bunkers before detonation. Soon, this evolved into the AGM-65 Maverick, a precision missile capable of hitting tank turrets or aircraft shelters with pinpoint accuracy. The principle hadn't changed since 1944. Don't destroy armor. Defeat it. Even the mighty bunker-buster bombs of the Gulf War, like the GBU-28, carried forward the Mark 8's design logic. It used a 5,000-pound casing, made from repurposed Navy gun barrels, capable of punching through 20 feet of concrete before exploding. It was the ultimate poetic circle. The Mark 8, once used to sink ships, had been reborn as a weapon to shatter underground fortresses. Every time a modern smart bomb tears through steel and detonates inside its target, the Mark 8's spirit is there, unseen but undeniable. Its influence reached even into space-age weapons. The kinetic penetrators used in anti-satellite missiles and hypersonic projectiles follow the same rulebook: extreme density, delayed explosion, and unstoppable velocity. In modern conflict zones, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, whenever precision weapons strike hidden bunkers or armored convoys, they are following in the footsteps of the Mark 8's terrifying precision. What began as a shell fired from a battleship's cannon evolved into an entire doctrine of warfare, where accuracy, timing, and penetration mattered more than size or brute force. The Mark 8 shell didn't just end the battleship era. It rewrote the very philosophy of destruction. Its design inspired engineers, terrified enemies, and shaped the backbone of every modern penetrative weapon built since. And though today's bombs are guided by satellites and computers, they all carry one ancient idea born in the crucible of World War II. 2. The true power of a weapon lies not in how loud it explodes, but in where it explodes. But the story doesn't end with missiles or smart bombs, because behind the science of the Mark 8 lies a human story. Of the men who built it, the sailors who feared it, and the moral questions it raised about just how far mankind should go in pursuit of power. The Mark 8 shell didn't come from a factory of monsters. It was born from the minds of men who believed they were saving the world. And in a way, they did. But their creation also unleashed a shadow that still lingers over modern warfare. This is the story behind the steel. The story of the scientists, engineers, and sailors who forged a weapon so powerful that even they began to question its very existence. In 1939, when war loomed over the horizon, the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ordnance summoned its best engineers to Washington. Among them was Dr. Charles Munro, a quiet physicist with a fascination for the physics of explosions, and Lieutenant Commander William Parrish, a naval tactician obsessed with one idea: no armor should be safe. Together, they set out to design something entirely new, a shell that didn't just explode on a target, it exploded inside it. They spent months locked away in underground labs at the Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia. There, surrounded by the roar of testing cannons and the smell of burnt metal, they shaped the weapon that would one day crush the Imperial Japanese Navy. Each prototype was heavier, denser, and more complex than the last. One of the scientists reportedly said, "We weren't designing shells anymore. We were designing physics itself." By late 1942, they had their answer. The Mark 8 armor-piercing shell, a 2,700-pound behemoth that could punch through 16 inches of hardened steel before detonating. The weapon was perfect, terrifyingly perfect. The final test took place off the coast of Virginia. A decommissioned battleship, its hull reinforced, was to be the victim. When the Mark 8 struck, it tore through the ship's entire side. Armor, decks, bulkheads, and exploded deep inside the engine room. Observers said the sound was unlike anything they had ever heard. The ship didn't just sink, it folded into itself as if crushed by an invisible hand. When the smoke cleared, Dr. Munro whispered quietly, "We've made something that doesn't belong in this world." But the military had no time for doubt. The Pacific War was raging, and America needed every weapon it could get. By 1944, Mark 8 shells were loaded aboard the USS Iowa, USS Missouri, and USS Wisconsin, the Navy's most powerful battleships. Soon, their thunder would echo across the seas near Leyte Gulf, Okinawa, and beyond. When the Yamato, Japan's largest battleship, was sunk under a rain of armor-piercing shells and torpedoes, Admiral Spruance received a message that read simply, "Target neutralized." But what that message didn't mention were the 3,000 Japanese sailors trapped below deck, most of whom never had a chance to escape. As reports came back from the Pacific, the same engineers who had celebrated their success began to feel the weight of it. Dr. Munro wrote in his personal journal, "We've proven what steel can do. Now I only wonder what it has done to us." After the war, the Mark 8 was retired, at least officially. But its design was never forgotten. Its penetrative principles became the basis for modern anti-tank rounds, bunker buster bombs, and even the early prototypes of nuclear artillery shells in the 1950s. The men who built the Mark 8 moved on to secret Cold War projects, one of which was Project Thor. The concept of dropping tungsten rods from orbit to mimic the same devastating kinetic energy that the Mark 8 had achieved from a battleship gun. It was proof that the Mark 8's legacy had outlived its creators. And perhaps outlived its morality. Today, at the old Naval Proving Ground in Virginia, the test range where the Mark VIII was born still stands. Its walls bear the scars of shrapnel and heat, a silent reminder of a time when men believed destruction could bring peace. Visitors say that at night, when the wind blows through the rusted gun barrels, it almost sounds like a deep metallic sigh, as if the ghosts of those who designed the Mark VIII are still there, whispering through the echoes of history. We built it to win a war, but in doing so, we taught the world how to end one. The Mark VIII shell was more than a weapon. It was a lesson written in fire and steel, a reminder that every invention, no matter how brilliant, carries a moral shadow. It destroyed the last great battleships. It redefined the future of warfare, and it forced humanity to look into the mirror and ask a terrifying question. If perfection in killing is possible, should we ever achieve it? If you were captivated by this forgotten chapter of military history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the secret weapons, hidden experiments, and untold moments that changed our world forever. Because here on History's No Escape, every story leaves a mark.